My name is Marcus Webb, and I am 64 years old. I'm writing this from a cabin in northern Manitoba, where the winter cold seeps through the walls and reminds me I am still alive. For now, anyway. I have been running for 27 years. Most people do not run that long unless they have done something terrible, or unless they have seen something terrible and chose to stop it. I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 6 months ago. The doctor in the small clinic looked at me with those eyes that doctors have when they know you are already dead. 3 months, he said. Maybe less. My son found me 3 weeks ago. Jeremy hired a private investigator, spent money he probably did not have, tracked me across 2 countries to this frozen corner of the world. He deserves answers. Maybe you do too. In 1998, I helped a Bigfoot escape from a government research facility in Oregon. I destroyed classified materials, I broke about 40 federal laws, and I drove through a security gate while men with guns tried to stop me. The news called me a terrorist. They said I stole dangerous biological materials, that I was a threat to national security. They were not completely wrong, I suppose. I did steal something valuable, just not in the way they meant. I was a veterinary pathologist before all this, good at my job, terrible at everything else. I had a wife who left me, a son who was afraid of me, and a career working for people who paid me enough not to ask questions. I worked for a private defense contractor called Biogen Solutions. Officially, we studied wildlife diseases for biodefense purposes. Unofficially, we did things that would make you sick if you knew the details. I never asked where the specimens came from. I never asked why some of them had eyes that looked too human, too aware. I did my job, collected my paycheck, and told myself that science required sacrifice. Then they brought in Subject 7, and everything I had built my life on collapsed. I'm telling this story now because I am dying, and because my son read enough of my journals to know I've been lying to him his entire adult life. He sat in this cabin last week and asked me directly what happened, why I ran, why I chose whatever I chose over being his father. So I am telling him. I'm telling you. Not because I want forgiveness, I gave up on that years ago, but because someone needs to know the truth about what our government does in unmarked facilities, about what lives in the forests we think we have mapped and understood. I helped a Bigfoot escape, and that Bigfoot taught me more about being human than any person ever did. That is the truth, simple and impossible. This is what happened in that facility. This is why I ran. This is why some secrets are worth losing everything to protect. I was 37 in 1995, recently divorced and professionally ambitious in that hollow way people are when they are trying to fill a void with achievement. My marriage to Rebecca had ended badly, not because of affairs or dramatic fights, but because I had simply stopped being present. Jeremy was 10 when Rebecca and I separated, at that age where a father's absence carves permanent shapes into who a boy becomes. The custody arrangement gave Rebecca primary custody. I got supervised visits twice a month, which felt like mercy at the time. The truth was uglier than I wanted to admit. Jeremy was afraid of me. Not because I hit him or yelled, I never did, but because I was cold, distant, more interested in my microscope than his baseball games. Rebecca tried to make it work. She really did. But you cannot build a marriage with someone who treats home like a hotel between business trips. Someone who remembers the cellular structure of diseased tissue but forgets his son's birthday. I told myself I was doing important work. National security, biodefense, protecting the country from emerging threats. The pay was exceptional, the work was challenging, and the moral compromises seemed small at the time. Biogen Solutions recruited me straight from a university research position. They wanted someone with veterinary pathology experience, someone who could examine unusual specimens and keep their mouth shut. I was perfect for the job. The facility was 2 hours outside Portland, hidden in rural forest that looked like any other logging territory. Above ground, it was just a small office building and some storage units. Below ground, it was something else entirely. 3 levels down, reinforced concrete, climate-controlled labs, holding cells that we called habitats even though they were cages. Military security, classified clearances, NDAs thick enough to bury you if you talked. My job was straightforward: examine specimens living or dead, document abnormalities, take tissue samples, perform necropsies when subjects expired, write reports that went to people whose names I never knew. I worked alone most of the time. The other researchers kept to their own projects, their own compartments of knowledge. We did not ask each other questions. That was the culture. That was how they wanted it. Most of the specimens were animals: bears with unusual mutations, wolves with strange behaviors, deer with abnormal growth patterns. Enough normal work to make the abnormal work feel like just another Tuesday. But sometimes they brought in things that were not quite animals, things that did not fit into any taxonomy I had studied, things that watched you with expressions that made your skin crawl. I told myself they were just undiscovered species, evolutionary oddities. The world was big. There were still things science had not cataloged. That was possible, right? I never asked where they came from. I never asked what happened to them after I finished my examinations. I cashed my paychecks and bought a nice apartment and tried not to think about the sounds I heard sometimes in the holding area. That was the man I was. That was the person I had become. Someone who had traded his conscience for career advancement and told himself it was worth it. The biogen facility existed in layers, and most people who worked there never saw beyond their assigned level. That was intentional. Compartmentalization, they called it. What you do not know cannot haunt you. Level 1 was administration in basic laboratories, normal stuff, microscopes, computers, break rooms with coffee that tasted like rust. You could work there for years and think you were employed by a regular research contractor. Level 2 was where things got stranger. Specialized labs, enhanced security, projects that required additional clearances. I worked mostly on Level 2 in a pathology suite that smelled like formaldehyde and bleach. Level 3 was where they kept the live specimens. I had limited access, only when my presence was required for examinations or procedures. Even then, I was escorted by armed security who watched me like I might suddenly decide to cause problems. The holding area on Level 3 had 12 cells, but they never kept more than 4 or 5 subjects at a time. Each cell had reinforced walls, one-way observation glass, and monitoring equipment that tracked everything from heart rate to thermal signatures. I had examined specimens from those cells for almost 3 years before they brought in the Bigfoot. Most died quickly, either from the stress of captivity or from the procedures we performed. We were not gentle. Gentle was not part of the mandate. Dr. Patricia Lynn ran the facility. She was brilliant, ruthless, and completely comfortable with what we were doing. She had worked on black projects for 15 years, done things in the name of national security that would make headlines if they ever got out. She treated the specimens like equipment, valuable equipment that needed care to remain functional, but equipment nonetheless. She could discuss vivisection protocols over lunch without her expression changing. The military presence was constant, but invisible. Security personnel rotated every 6 months, never stayed long enough to form opinions or ask questions. They were professionals, paid extremely well to forget what they saw. Funding came from sources I never traced. Defense Department contracts, private sector partnerships, shell companies that existed only on paper. The money was unlimited as long as results were produced. Results meant data, tissue samples, genetic material, behavioral studies, stress response measurements, everything documented, everything filed, everything contributing to research goals that were never fully explained to me. I knew we were studying cryptids. That much was obvious. What I did not know was why, or what they planned to do with the information. Bioweapons development, maybe. Genetic engineering applications, enhanced soldier programs. I did not ask. The other researchers were like me, smart, morally flexible, willing to overlook ethical concerns for the sake of career and paycheck. We did not socialize. We did not discuss our work outside the facility. We were professionals. I told myself I was a scientist. That discovery required sacrifice, that someone had to do this work, and it might as well be someone competent. I told myself a lot of things in those years. Then they brought in Subject 7, and all those justifications turned to dust. They brought the Bigfoot in on a cold morning in late January of 1998. I was reviewing tissue samples when Dr. Lin called me down to level 3. Her voice on the intercom was excited, the kind of excitement that made my stomach tighten. The holding cell was the largest one, reinforced for maximum security. Through the observation glass, I could see the Bigfoot lying on the floor, sedated, but not unconscious. Even sprawled out, it was massive, easily 6 feet tall, covered in reddish-brown fur that was matted with blood. Subject 7, they called it. Like it was the 7th mouse in a laboratory study, not a living being that defied everything science claimed about the natural world. I had seen photographs before, grainy images that people dismissed as hoaxes. I had read reports that the government officially denied, but I had never seen one in person, never understood the physical reality of something that was not supposed to exist. The Bigfoot was young, I could tell that immediately. The proportions were not fully adult. The features still carried a softness that would harden with age. Adolescent, maybe. Equivalent to a teenage human. It had been shot. Twice, from what I could see. Tranquilizer darts, probably, but also a bullet wound in the shoulder that had been hastily bandaged. Someone had wanted it alive, but had not been careful about the capture. Dr. Lin stood beside me, making notes on a tablet. "We need a full examination," she said. "Tissue samples from multiple sites, blood work, radiographs, dental impressions, standard intake protocol." I nodded, still staring at the Bigfoot. Its eyes were half open, tracking movement despite the sedation. It knew where it was. It knew what was happening. I could see that awareness, that terrible understanding. "How did you get it?" I asked. "Where did it come from?" Dr. Lin glanced at me with an expression that said I was asking inappropriate questions. "That is not your concern, Marcus. Your job is examination and documentation, not acquisition logistics." I watched the Bigfoot breathe, watched its chest rise and fall in a rhythm that looked too human. It had hands, not paws, fingers with nails, not claws. A face that was somewhere between ape and human, but neither. The intake examination took 4 hours, blood draws, tissue biopsies, measurements, photographs. The Bigfoot was conscious for some of it, restrained and clearly terrified. It made sounds that were not quite words, but definitely communication. Distress calls, maybe. Crying. I performed the procedures mechanically, professionally, the way I had been trained. But my hands were shaking. Something about this felt different, wrong in a way I could not articulate. When I finished, I asked Dr. Lin what the research goals were. What were we trying to learn from this specimen? She smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "Everything," she said. "We are going to learn everything." Over the next 3 weeks, I examined the Bigfoot almost daily. The routine was always the same. Sedation, restraints, procedures, documentation. I measured healing rates, took more tissue samples, monitored vital signs. The Bigfoot was dying. I knew that, even if Dr. Lin refused to acknowledge it. The bullet wound was infected despite antibiotics. The stress of captivity was breaking down its immune system. It was losing weight, refusing the food they offered. But it was the other observations that kept me awake at night. The things I documented in my official reports and tried to forget afterward. The Bigfoot used tools. Simple ones, but definite tool use. It would take its food bowl and bang it against the floor in patterns that seemed deliberate, rhythmic, almost musical. Communication attempts, maybe, or just the actions of a prisoner going insane. It drew pictures. Someone had made the mistake of giving it a blanket, and the Bigfoot pulled threads from it, arranged them on the floor in shapes, trees, mountains, stick figures that might represent family members. When researchers entered the cell, the Bigfoot would back into the corner and cover its face with its hands. Not aggressive, not fighting, just hiding, ashamed maybe, or trying to preserve some dignity in a situation where dignity was impossible. I started reviewing the security footage from times when no one was in the cell. I do not know why. Professional curiosity, I told myself. But really, I was looking for something. Evidence, maybe. Proof that what I was feeling was justified. What I saw made me sick. The Bigfoot cried at night. Real tears, real sobbing. It would curl up in the corner and shake, making sounds that were too close to human grief. It would touch its wounds gently, exploring the damage we had done. It tried to communicate with the cameras, It would stare directly at them and make gestures, point at itself, point at the door, put its hands together like begging. "Please," those gestures said. "Please let me go. Please stop hurting me." I showed the footage to Dr. Lin. I thought, she needs to see this. She needs to understand what we are doing. She watched for 30 seconds, then closed the window. "Anthropomorphization," she said. "You're projecting human emotions onto an animal. Do not let sentiment interfere with your work." But I had seen its eyes. I had watched it problem solve, watched it communicate, watched it grieve. This was not an animal. This was a person. Different, yes. Non-human, yes. But a person nonetheless. I asked what would happen when the research phase was complete, when we had gathered all the data we needed. "Terminal procedures," Dr. Lin said casually. "Full dissection. We need to map neural structures, examine organ systems. You will lead the necropsy. It is scheduled for next month." She was talking about vivisection, cutting the Bigfoot open while it was alive or freshly dead, taking it apart like a machine to see how it worked. I started drinking that week. Nothing dramatic, just a glass of whiskey every night. Then 2 glasses. Then I stopped counting. I could not stop thinking about the Bigfoot, about its eyes watching me during examinations, about the drawings it made with threads, about the sounds it made at night when it thought no one was listening. I thought about Jeremy, my son. He was 12 now, growing up with a father who was absent even during visits. Rebecca had told me once that Jeremy asked why I did not love him enough to be around. I told her he was wrong, that of course I loved him. But love without presence is just a word, just an excuse. I started wondering what kind of man I had become, what kind of person could do what I did every day and sleep at night. The answer was not flattering. Dr. Lin mentioned casually that Subject 7 was the 7th specimen of its kind they had acquired. Past tense. Had acquired, meaning there had been 6 others before. I asked what happened to them. Where were the previous subjects now? She looked at me like I was stupid. "Processed, Marcus. We processed them. The data from those necropsies is what justified continuing the program." Processed, like they were paperwork, not living beings. 6 Bigfoots captured and killed and cut apart for science, for defense applications, for whatever classified purpose justified the budget. And Subject 7 was scheduled for the same fate, 4 weeks from now, give or take. I thought about that, about those intelligent eyes going dark on my examination table, about that awareness ending because someone decided the information in its body was more valuable than its life. I went home that night and looked at the photograph I kept of Jeremy. He was 8 in the picture, smiling, holding a fish he had caught on one of our rare camping trips, before the divorce, before I became the person I was now. If Jeremy knew what I did, would he be proud? Would he think his father was serving his country, protecting people from unknown threats? Or would he see me the way I was starting to see myself, as someone complicit in torture, in murder? I poured another drink and tried to rationalize it. The Bigfoot was not human. It did not have rights. What we were doing was legal, classified, sanctioned by people far above my pay grade, but legal and right are not always the same thing. I had learned that from history books, from stories about scientists who did terrible things because they were ordered to, because the law said it was acceptable. I did not want to be that kind of scientist, that kind of man, that kind of father, raising a son who would one day learn what his dad really did for a living. I made a decision that night. It was not brave or noble. It was just necessary. The only choice that let me look at myself without wanting to disappear. I was going to get Subject 7 out of that facility. And then I was going to run. Planning the escape took 8 days. I could not rush it, could not afford mistakes. One error and I would be in a cell myself, or worse. I mapped the facility's security protocols in my head. Guard rotations, camera positions, electronic locks. I had been working there for 3 years, long enough to notice patterns. The night shift was smaller, just 4 security personnel instead of 12. They rotated through predictable rounds, checking each level at 30-minute intervals. Between rounds, there were gaps, small ones, but enough. The loading dock was the weak point. Deliveries came twice a week, supplies and equipment. The gate opened automatically for authorized vehicles. My truck was authorized. I'd used it for specimen transport before. I would need to sedate the Bigfoot carefully. Too much, and it would not be able to move. Too little, and it might panic and alert security. I calculated dosages based on body mass, stole the drugs from the pharmacy over several days, small amounts, nothing that would trigger inventory alerts. I prepared a go bag, cash, fake ID I had purchased years ago, clothes, first aid supplies, everything I would need to disappear. I withdrew money from my accounts gradually, nothing suspicious. $20,000 total, not much, but enough to run on for a while. I packed medical equipment, antibiotics, surgical supplies, pain medication. The Bigfoot's wounds were infected. Without treatment, it would die, even if I got it out. I needed to keep it alive long enough to... What? I had not thought that far ahead. I rehearsed the route in my mind. Level 3 to Level 2, service elevator to avoid cameras. Level 2 to loading dock. 4 minutes if nothing went wrong. 8 minutes if I encountered problems. 10 minutes before someone noticed the empty cell. The hardest part was not second-guessing myself. Every day I went to work, examined the Bigfoot, pretended everything was normal. Dr. Lin praised my thoroughness. The security team nodded politely when I passed. They trusted me. I'd never given them reason not to. I chose the date carefully. A Friday, when weekend staffing was minimal. Valentine's Day, actually, 1998. That detail struck me as funny somehow. Breaking a Bigfoot out of a government lab on the day meant for love and roses. I left a letter for Jeremy with my lawyer, sealed, and not to be opened unless I disappeared. I could not explain the truth, so I just wrote that I loved him, that I was sorry, that sometimes people have to make impossible choices. I did not say goodbye to Rebecca. What would I say? I'm about to commit federal crimes and become a fugitive, take care of our son? The night before, barely slept. I kept thinking about all the ways this could go wrong, getting shot at the gate, the Bigfoot dying from stress, getting caught and spending the rest of my life in prison. But I also thought about those eyes watching me, about thread drawings on a cell floor, about 6 other Bigfoots who had died in that facility. I was not brave. I was just tired of being the villain in my own story. I arrived at the facility just after midnight, late enough that the evening shift had left, early enough that the night crew was still alert. I needed them tired, distracted, thinking about the hours until dawn. I swiped my access card, passed through the main entrance. The security guard, Thompson, nodded at me. "Working late again, Doc?" "Finishing reports," I said. "Deadline Monday." He waved me through. I'd worked late before. I was reliable, predictable, not the type to cause problems. That was the man they knew. I took the elevator to level 3, my heart hammering so hard I thought the camera would pick it up, but I kept my face neutral, checked my phone like I was reading messages. Just another night. The Bigfoot was awake when I entered the holding area. It always was at night. It watched me approach the cell, and I saw recognition in its eyes. Not trust exactly, but awareness. It knew me. I'd brought the sedative in a regular syringe, nothing suspicious. I spoke quietly, even though I knew it could not understand English. "Hey, I need you to trust me. I'm getting you out." The Bigfoot tilted its head, listening to my tone more than my words. I unlocked the cell, my hands shaking. If it attacked me, if it panicked, everything would fall apart. But it did not move, just watched me approach. I showed it the syringe, pantomimed what I was going to do. "Sleep," I said. "Then we leave. We go." The Bigfoot extended its arms slowly, offering, letting me inject the sedative. That moment broke something in me. The trust in that gesture, the understanding. The drug worked quickly. The Bigfoot swayed, sat down heavily. I caught it before it fell, lowered it gently. It was heavy, nearly 300 pounds of muscle and bone. I could not carry it. I disconnected the monitoring equipment carefully, buying time before alarms triggered. Then, I helped the Bigfoot stand, supporting most of its weight. We moved slowly toward the door. The service elevator was 30 feet away. We made it halfway before I heard footsteps. Security guard, making rounds. I had miscalculated. He was early. I pressed back against the wall, the Bigfoot sagging against me. The guard walked past, checking doors. He did not look our direction. We reached the elevator. I hit the button, praying it would not ding too loudly. The doors opened. We stepped inside. Level 2. Then, the loading dock. My truck was parked outside, backed up to the delivery entrance like I was loading equipment. We were almost there, almost free. Then the alarm started. Someone had noticed the empty cell, the disconnected monitors. The facility went into lockdown mode, red lights flashing, sirens screaming. I ran, half dragging the Bigfoot, through the loading dock doors into my truck. The Bigfoot collapsed in the passenger seat. I started the engine. Ahead, the gate was closing. Security was coming. I slammed the accelerator down and drove straight at it. The truck hit the gate at 40 miles per hour. Metal screamed, something snapped, and then we were through. Sparks flying, the gate dragging behind us until it fell away. I heard shouting, maybe gunfire. I could not tell. The engine was roaring. My ears were ringing. Everything was happening too fast to process. I took the first turn hard, tires screaming, then another. I was heading for the forest access roads, routes I had scouted weeks before, unpaved, unmapped, places where vehicles could disappear. The Bigfoot was unconscious beside me, slumped against the door. Blood from its old wounds had soaked through the bandages I had applied. I needed to stop, needed to treat it properly. But not yet. Not until we had distance. I drove for 30 minutes on back roads, going deeper into wilderness, no headlights behind me. They had not followed. Not yet. I found the hunting cabin around 2 in the morning. It belonged to a colleague from university, someone who had moved to Alaska years ago. I'd kept the key, had checked on it occasionally. It was isolated 40 miles from the nearest town. I parked behind the cabin, out of sight. Then I helped the Bigfoot inside, struggling under its weight. It was barely conscious, mumbling sounds that might have been words in some language I did not know. I laid it on the floor, checked its vitals. Heart rate too fast, breathing shallow. Shock, infection, stress. Take your pick. I spent the next 4 hours working, cleaned the wounds properly, debrided infected tissue, administered antibiotics intravenously. The Bigfoot woke several times, looked at me with confused, frightened eyes. I spoke softly, tried to sound reassuring. You are safe now. They cannot hurt you anymore. I promise. I did not know if it understood, but it stopped fighting, let me work. By dawn, I had done everything I could medically. The Bigfoot was stable, sleeping naturally instead of from sedation. Its breathing was easier. The wounds looked better already. I sat against the wall, exhausted. My clothes were covered in blood. My hands were shaking from adrenaline crash. I had just destroyed my entire life in one night. My phone had 17 missed calls. I turned it off, removed the battery. They would be tracking it, trying to find me. I thought about Jeremy, about what he would hear when the news broke. His father, wanted for bioterrorism, for theft of classified materials, maybe for treason. I would never see him grow up, never get a chance to explain. He would believe whatever story they told, and that story would make me a monster. But I looked at the Bigfoot sleeping on the floor, finally peaceful, finally safe, and I knew I would make the same choice again. Some things are worth losing everything for. I had learned that too late for my marriage, too late for my relationship with my son, but maybe not too late to save one life that mattered. The first 3 days in the cabin were critical. The Bigfoot's fever spiked twice, its body fighting infections that would have killed a human. I pumped it full of antibiotics, monitored its temperature constantly, changed bandages every few hours. I could not sleep. Every sound outside made me think they had found us. Every car on the distant road made my heart race. I kept the truck hidden, the cabin dark at night. We existed in silence and shadows. The Bigfoot was afraid of me at first. When it woke fully, it scrambled away, backed into a corner. Its eyes were wild, looking for escape routes. I stayed back, gave it space. I put food within reach, water in a bowl. I spoke quietly, moved slowly. I'm not going to hurt you, I said. You are safe here. It took a full day before the Bigfoot would eat. It watched me constantly, tracking my movements. When I came too close, it would bare its teeth, make warning sounds deep in its chest. I understood. I had been its torturer for weeks. The person who heard it took pieces of it, held it down while others did worse. Why would it trust me now? But slowly, things changed. I treated its wounds gently, carefully. I brought food and left it alone while it ate. I gave it blankets, space, time to heal. By the 5th day, the Bigfoot let me approach without panic. It watched me change bandages, accepted water directly from my hand. Small steps toward something that was not quite trust, but was close. I realized I needed to name it something other than Subject 7. That designation felt wrong, dehumanizing. But I did not know Bigfoot names, did not know if they even had names. So I called it 7 anyway, but said it differently, like a name, not a number. 7, are you hungry? 7, let me check your wounds. 7 responded to the tone, if not the word. It learned to recognize my voice, to differentiate between I am helping you and I need you to stay still. The wounds were healing faster than I expected. Bigfoot biology was remarkable. Accelerated tissue regeneration, robust immune system. Within a week, the bullet wound that should have taken months to heal was already closing, but the psychological damage was deeper. 7 flinched at sudden movements. It would not go near the cabin door. At night, it whimpered in its sleep, making sounds that broke my heart. I started realizing how young 7 really was. The way it moved, the proportions, the reactions. This was not an adult. This was a teenager maybe, captured young, traumatized, alone. I thought about Jeremy again. He was 12, the same age 7 might be in Bigfoot years. How would Jeremy survive what 7 had survived? He would not. No one should have to. On the 7th day, 7 reached out and touched my hand while I was changing bandages. Just a brief touch, testing. I froze, let it happen. 7 pulled back, watched my reaction. I smiled. It is okay. You're okay now. 7 made a sound, soft and uncertain. Not words, but meaning. Maybe, thank you. Maybe I understand. The news broke on the 3rd day. I heard it on the cabin's ancient radio, tuned low so 7 would not panic at the sound. Veterinary researcher wanted in connection with domestic terrorism incident. Marcus Webb, 37, suspected of stealing classified biological materials from a private research facility. Armed and dangerous. Federal manhunt underway. They did not mention the Bigfoot. Of course they did not. Admitting what they had in that facility would raise questions they could not answer. My face was everywhere. News websites, FBI bulletins, social media. Someone had leaked my employment photo, the one where I looked competent and trustworthy. That man seemed like a stranger now. Rebecca was interviewed. She looked tired, angry, confused. I do not know what he was thinking. This is not the man I married. He has not been that man for a long time. They asked about Jeremy. Is your son safe? Does he have any idea where his father might be? Rebecca put her arm around Jeremy, pulled him close. My son has nothing to do with this. Marcus has barely been part of his life for years. Leave us alone. I saw Jeremy's face on the screen. 12 years old, scared, trying to understand why his father was on the news, why people were calling him a terrorist. I turned off the radio. 7 was watching me, reading my body language the way it was learning to do. It made a questioning sound. I showed it my phone, the news article with my photo. Me, I said, pointing at myself, then at the screen. Bad. They think I am bad. 7 tilted its head, considering. Then it pointed at the screen, then at me. It made a sound, then pointed at itself. I understood. It was connecting our situations. Both of us were hunted. Both of us were running. Both of us were considered dangerous by people who did not understand. The manhunt intensified over the next week. FBI agents visited the cabin's owner in Alaska, asked about property he might own. They traced my credit cards, my phone records, interviewed everyone I had ever worked with. Dr. Lynn made a statement. Marcus Webb was a valued researcher who apparently suffered a psychotic break. We are cooperating fully with authorities. The materials he stole pose significant public health risks. Public health risks, that was how they framed it. Not, we were torturing a sentient being. Not, we murdered 6 others before this one. I knew I could never go back, even if I turned myself in, even if I tried to expose what they were doing. they would bury me. Classified facility, national security, no evidence to support my claims. I would rot in prison while they continued their work, so I made plans to disappear completely. New identity, new location, new life. And Seven would come with me, because letting it go was not an option yet. It was still too injured, too vulnerable, too dependent on medical care. We were bound together now, two fugitives, two beings who did not fit into normal society, running from people who wanted to hurt us for different reasons, but with the same intensity. Seven started teaching me things in the second week. Not deliberately at first, just by example, but I paid attention, learned quickly. Survival depended on it. Seven showed me how to move quietly in the forest, how to place feet carefully, test the ground before putting weight down, how to avoid snapping branches, disturbing undergrowth. Centuries of evolution hiding from predators had taught its kind to be ghosts. I watched Seven identify edible plants, mushrooms that were safe versus ones that would make you sick. It would smell them, sometimes taste a tiny amount, then either eat or discard. Knowledge passed down through generations, now being shared with an unlikely student. Seven was a better tracker than any human I had known. It could read signs I could not see, identify animals by scent alone, predict where water sources were located just by listening to the forest. We communicated through gestures and demonstrations. Seven would show me something, wait for me to replicate it, correct my mistakes patiently. The roles had reversed. I was no longer the scientist studying a specimen. I was the student learning from a master. One afternoon, Seven led me to a stream I had not known existed. It demonstrated how to catch fish with bare hands, moving slowly in shallow water until they could be grabbed. I tried, failed repeatedly. Seven made a sound that might have been laughter. These lessons were not just practical, they were trust-building. Seven was sharing its knowledge, its culture, the things that made it who it was. That is intimate, revealing yourself to someone else, especially to someone who had hurt you. I tried to reciprocate, teaching Seven about human things, how to use a can opener, how matches worked, basic first aid. Seven learned quickly, had hands dexterous enough to manipulate tools easily. I realized Seven's intelligence was not just human level. In some ways, it was superior. Better memory, better spatial reasoning, better sensory integration. Its brain was different, wired for different priorities, but absolutely not primitive. We developed a simple communication system, signs for common concepts, sounds for others. Danger was a sharp hiss, food was a low grunt, water was a specific whistle. We built a vocabulary, limited but functional. Seven drew pictures in the dirt sometimes, showing me things it remembered. I saw images of family groups, adults and children. I saw images of forests, mountains, caves. I saw images of humans with guns and Bigfoots running. One drawing showed a small Bigfoot, maybe Seven itself, surrounded by larger ones. Family. Then the larger ones were gone, crossed out. Seven touched its chest, then touched the drawing of the small Bigfoot left alone. I understood. Seven had been captured after its family was killed, taken young, sold or delivered to the facility. It had lost everything before the torture even began. I drew my own picture. A small human, Jeremy. Then me, far away, separated. Seven looked at it, then at me. It made a sad sound, understanding. We were both orphans in our own ways, both isolated, both grieving. We stayed in the cabin for 6 weeks before I decided we needed to move. The manhunt had not cooled, and someone would eventually remember that cabin, make the connection, send agents to investigate. Seven was strong enough to travel now. The wounds had healed, leaving scars that would mark it forever, but no longer causing pain. It had gained weight, muscle rebuilding. It was nearly 7 feet tall now, still growing. We left at night, taking only what we could carry. I'd purchased supplies over several trips to distant towns, paying cash, wearing hats that obscured my face from cameras, food, camping gear, medical supplies, enough to survive off-grid for months. Seven led us north, avoiding roads and trails. We moved through old-growth forest where humans rarely went, where satellite surveillance could not penetrate the canopy. Seven knew how to find these routes, how to stay invisible. We traveled mostly at night, Safer that way, less chance of encountering hikers or hunters. 7 could see in darkness far better than I could. I followed its lead, trusting its instincts. We crossed into British Columbia after a week of hard travel. No border checkpoint, no customs, just forest that did not care about human boundaries. 7 seemed more relaxed once we left the United States. Maybe it sensed we were farther from immediate danger. We found an abandoned logging camp, buildings rotting but still standing. 7 refused to go inside, made distressed sounds at the smell of human occupation. So we camped nearby, using the structures for storage but sleeping outdoors. I started documenting things in a journal I had brought, not scientific observations but memories. The way 7 hummed while eating, content sounds that meant satisfaction. The way it would touch my shoulder when it wanted my attention, gentle despite its strength. I wrote about the lessons I was learning. That fear is a choice, that civilization is not the same as technology, that connection matters more than comfort. 7 was teaching me to be human in ways I had never understood before. One night, 7 woke me urgently. It was making alarm sounds, pointing at the sky. I looked up and saw a helicopter, distant but clearly searching with a spotlight. They were still looking, expanding the search pattern. We moved immediately, hiking deeper into wilderness. 7 set a punishing pace, moving fast over terrain I struggled with. It would stop sometimes, wait for me to catch up, then take my hand and pull me forward. We reached a cave system by dawn. 7 inspected it carefully, making sure it was safe, then led me inside. We hid there for 2 days while helicopters circled overhead. In the darkness of that cave, 7 sat close to me, sharing warmth, offering comfort. I had become its protector during the escape, but now 7 was protecting me. We were a team, an unlikely pair, but bonded by shared danger and shared choice. I had chosen to save 7. 7 had chosen to trust me, to teach me, to keep me alive when I was too slow and too human to survive alone. The years blurred together in a strange rhythm of constant movement and occasional stillness. We would find a place, stay for a few months, then move again when something felt wrong or when 7 sensed danger I could not perceive. We spent a winter in northern Alberta, holed up in a trapper's cabin that had been abandoned for decades. 7 and I survived on stored supplies and whatever 7 could forage. I learned to eat things I had never considered food before. 7 taught me patience that winter, how to sit still for hours, observing, how to notice small changes in the environment that indicated weather shifts or approaching animals, how to exist without constantly doing, planning, worrying. I had been a man who needed activity, achievement, validation. 7 showed me the value of simply being, present, aware, alive in each moment rather than always racing toward the next goal. We had close calls over the years. A hunter spotted 7 in 2001, called authorities. We ran, covered 200 miles in 3 days, 7 pushing me beyond what I thought were my limits. We escaped, but barely. A forest ranger nearly walked into our camp in 2004. 7 vanished into the trees in seconds, completely silent. I convinced the ranger I was just a wilderness enthusiast on an extended camping trip. He bought it, but we moved that same night. The federal manhunt officially ended in 2006. They did not catch me, so eventually they had to allocate resources elsewhere. But I knew I was still in databases, still flagged. One traffic stop, one background check, and I would be arrested. 7 was fully grown by then, nearly 8 feet tall, probably 500 pounds of muscle. It was magnificent, powerful, capable of things that seemed impossible. It could climb cliff faces I could not, could go days without food when necessary, could sense storms hours before they arrived. But 7 was also gentle, careful with me as I aged, as my body started breaking down from years of hard living. 7 would slow its pace when I struggled, would carry supplies when I was too tired, would find sheltered campsites when weather turned bad. Our roles had completely reversed from the facility. I was no longer the scientist, the authority, the one with power. 7 was the expert, and I was the dependent one. I learned 7's people had a complex culture, barely understood. There were rituals for greeting the sunrise, specific ways to mark territory, songs that 7 sang sometimes when it thought I was asleep, haunting sounds that carried loss and longing. Seven would draw pictures still, showing me memories. I saw images of Bigfoot communities, dozens of individuals living together. I saw images of ceremonies, celebrations, daily life, a culture that had existed for thousands of years in the shadows of human civilization. And I saw images of that culture disappearing. Fewer individuals in each drawing, smaller groups until only scattered survivors remained, extinction happening in slow motion, generation by generation. Seven was one of the last. Maybe not the very last, but close. A dying species, hunted and studied and destroyed by mine. In 2008, something changed. Seven started acting restless, agitated. It would disappear for hours, returning with dirt under its nails and a focused expression I had not seen before. I did not ask. I'd learned to let Seven have privacy, to respect boundaries. We'd been together for 10 years by then, long enough to understand each other without words. Then one evening, Seven came back and gestured for me to follow. It was excited, making sounds that indicated something important. I grabbed my pack and followed. We hiked for 3 days, moving deeper into the Canadian Rockies than we had ever gone. Seven was navigating toward something specific, something it had been searching for. On the third day, we reached a valley so remote I doubted humans had ever found it. Hidden by peaks on all sides, accessible only through narrow passages that were easy to miss. Perfect hiding place. Seven made a specific sound, a call that echoed off the rock walls. Then it waited. Minutes passed. Then I heard something that made my breath catch, an answering call, deeper, from somewhere in the valley. Seven ran forward, and I struggled to keep up. We reached a clearing, and I stopped, stunned. 4 Bigfoots emerged from the trees, 3 adults and 1 juvenile. They were cautious, watching me warily, but focused on Seven. The largest stepped forward, made sounds I recognized as communication. Seven responded, their conversation intense. Then Seven turned to me, gestured. The large Bigfoot approached slowly. It was massive, even bigger than Seven, gray in its fur, old. It studied me with eyes that held intelligence and deep wariness. I stood still, hands visible, non-threatening. Seven spoke, if that is the right word, making sounds and gestures that seemed to be explaining something. Vouching for me, maybe. The old Bigfoot reached out slowly, touched my face with one enormous hand. Its palm was rough, warm. It looked into my eyes for a long moment, searching for something. Then it stepped back, made a sound to the others. Whatever test I had passed, I had passed. Seven's family had survived. Not all of them, I learned later. Many had died, but these few had. Hidden well enough to endure. Seven was reunited with its mother, I realized. The way they touched, the sounds they made, the obvious relief. 10 years separated, both believing the other was dead. There was a younger Bigfoot too, sibling maybe, and 2 others, unrelated but part of the group, a community, small, fragile, but alive. They had been searching for each other, these survivors, following old routes, leaving signs, hoping. Seven had been doing the same and finally found them. I watched Seven with its family, and I understood what I had to do, what I should have done years ago. This was not my place. These beings did not need a human living among them, drawing danger, reminding them of what my species had done. Seven belonged here, with its own kind, safe, and I needed to let go. The decision to leave took me 3 days to accept. Logically, I knew it was right. Emotionally, it was devastating. Seven had become my family, the only being I had truly connected with in a decade. We had survived together, learned together, depended on each other through dangers that should have killed us both. But I was selfish, keeping Seven with me. Seven belonged with other Bigfoots, not with a human who was aging badly and slowing down. The old Bigfoot, whom I started calling Elder in my mind, made the situation clear without being cruel. It showed me signs of human presence in the forest, surveying equipment, trail cameras, helicopter paths. The world was shrinking, and my presence increased the risk of discovery. Seven's younger sibling was terrified of me. It would not come close, made distress sounds when I moved too quickly. That alone told me what I needed to know. Humans had done too much damage. Even a human who helped, who meant well, was still a threat by association. I pulled Seven aside, away from the others. We sat together like we had hundreds of times before, and I tried to explain. I pointed at Seven, then at the other Bigfoots. Family, home, safe. Then I pointed at myself, then away from the valley. I leave. You stay. Seven made a sound of distress, shook its head. It grabbed my arm, held tight, refusing. I understood. Seven had lost its family once, been alone for years. Now it did not want to be abandoned again, even if the abandonment was for its own good. But I persisted. I drew pictures in the dirt, Seven surrounded by other Bigfoots, protected, hidden, then me alone, drawing danger away. Better. Seven looked at the drawings for a long time. Then it started crying. Real tears, real grief. It pulled me close in an embrace that was gentle despite its strength. We held each other, two beings who had saved each other in different ways. I had freed Seven from the facility. Seven had freed me from the person I had been. The other Bigfoots watched from a distance, understanding what was happening even if they could not grasp the details. Elder approached, placed a hand on Seven's shoulder. It spoke to Seven in their language, sounds I could not interpret but recognized as wisdom. Parental guidance, maybe. Reminding Seven that safety mattered more than want. Seven finally released me, nodded slowly. It understood. It did not like it, but it understood. Seven walked to the trees, broke off a branch, began carving it with a stone tool. It worked for an hour, shaping something with careful attention. When Seven finished, it gave me the carving. A figure, crude but recognizable. A human and a Bigfoot side by side. Remembrance. I took it, promised to keep it always. Then I said goodbye. Seven walked me to the edge of the valley, refused to let me leave without that escort. At the narrow passage out, we stopped. Seven touched my face one last time, made a sound I had heard before. Gratitude, maybe. Or love in whatever form that exists between species. Then it turned and walked back to its family. And I walked away alone. I wandered for the next 16 years, a ghost moving through the margins of civilization. I took work where I could find it, always using false names, always moving before anyone got curious. I worked construction in Alaska, washing dishes in Yukon Territory, as a hunting guide in northern Manitoba. Cash jobs that did not ask for identification or background checks. I was good with my hands, knew wilderness, kept my mouth shut. That was enough. The loneliness was crushing at first. After 10 years with Seven, the silence of being truly alone felt like drowning. I would wake at night reaching for a presence that was not there. But slowly, I adjusted. I learned to be alone without being lonely, to find meaning in small things. A well-cooked meal, a sunset, the sound of rain on a tent. Seven had taught me to be present, and I honored that lesson. I thought about Jeremy constantly. He would be an adult now, maybe married, maybe with children I would never meet. I imagined his life, hoped he was happy, hoped he had not been too damaged by having a father labeled a terrorist. I checked news occasionally, in libraries where I could use computers anonymously. The facility where I had worked had been quietly shut down in 2003, officially for budget reasons. Really, I suspected, because one escaped subject and one rogue researcher had made them vulnerable. Dr. Lin had moved to a university position, teaching genetics. Her work at the facility was classified, never mentioned in her public biography. She had faced no consequences, no accountability. The others, the security personnel, the other researchers, they had scattered to other classified projects. The machine continued, just in different locations with different covers. I never tried to expose them. What evidence did I have? A decade-old journal that sounded insane. Memories that could not be verified. I would be dismissed as delusional, and Seven's community would be investigated, discovered, destroyed. Silence was protection. For them, for me, for the secret that some things still existed in the Siyatam, wild places where humanity had not yet conquered. I aged badly. Hard living, stress, exposure to elements. My hair went gray early, my hands developed arthritis, old injuries from running through forests never properly healed. I looked 70 when I was 50, but I was at peace in ways I had never been during my comfortable life. I had made a choice that mattered, saved a life that deserved saving, learned lessons that made me better than I had been. I visited the valley once in 2015, just to see. I stayed far back and I used binoculars. I saw 7 still alive, teaching a young Bigfoot something, passing on knowledge, being the elder now. 7 looked happy. That was enough. I left without making contact. 7 had a life now, a purpose. I was a memory, a strange chapter in its past. That was how it should be. I continued wandering, continued surviving, continued carrying the secret that had defined my entire adult life. The cancer announced itself quietly, the way catastrophic things often do. A small pain in my abdomen that I ignored for months, fatigue that I blamed on age, weight loss that seemed like a natural consequence of hard living. By the time I saw a doctor, by the time I stopped pretending I was fine, it was too late. The clinic in Manitoba did blood work, imaging, delivered the verdict with practiced sympathy. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. Metastasized to the liver. 3 months maybe. Surgery was not an option. Chemotherapy might buy a few weeks but would make me miserable. I chose to die with dignity rather than suffering for marginal time. The doctor understood, gave me pain medication, sent me away to make peace with whatever I needed to make peace with. I was 64 years old. I'd been running for 27 years. I was tired, ready to stop. But first, I needed to tell the truth. Not to the world. They would not believe me anyway. To Jeremy, who deserved to know why his father disappeared, why he made the choices he made. I hired a private investigator, gave him Jeremy's information and money to find him. No explanation, just find this person and give him my location. Jeremy showed up 3 weeks later. I heard a truck approaching the cabin, saw a man get out who looked like me and like Rebecca, our son, middle-aged now, looking tired and wary. I met him at the door. He stared at me, trying to match the old man in front of him with the father he barely remembered. "Dad?" His voice broke on the word. Years of anger and confusion in one syllable. I nodded. "Yeah, it is me. I'm sorry for everything." We stood there in awkward silence until Jeremy spoke again. "The investigator said you were dying, said you wanted to see me before it was over. I am. And I do. But mostly, you deserve to know the truth. Why I disappeared. What really happened." Jeremy looked skeptical, defensive. "I've heard the truth. You stole classified materials, destroyed government property. They called you a domestic terrorist. I know what they called me. It is not accurate, but I cannot prove that. All I can do is tell you my side and let you decide what you believe." Jeremy hesitated, then nodded. He had come this far. He deserved to hear it. We went inside. I made coffee on the old stove. We sat across from each other, strangers who shared blood and history but nothing else. And I told him everything. The facility, the Bigfoots, Subject 7, the escape, the years on the run. Every detail, every choice, every consequence. Jeremy listened without interrupting. His expression moved through disbelief, anger, confusion, maybe eventually something like understanding. When I finished, he sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he spoke. That is insane, Dad. You were telling me you threw away your entire life for Bigfoot, for something that most people think is a myth." I met his eyes. I threw away the life I was living, yes, but I gained something more valuable. I became a person I could live with. That is worth more than career or reputation or anything else. Jeremy shook his head, overwhelmed. Jeremy stayed for 2 weeks, and we talked like we had never talked when he was young. He asked questions I tried to answer honestly. Why did I work at that facility? Why did I choose to help 7 instead of calling authorities? Why did I never reach out, never explain? I told him the truth, that I had been running from myself long before I was running from the government, that the facility gave me an excuse to avoid being a father, a husband, a person with obligations beyond my own ambition. Jeremy told me about his life. He had become a teacher, like his mother, married, 2 children, a quiet life in Oregon, stable and present for his family in ways I had never been. He was a better man than I had ever been, and I told him so. He had broken the cycle I had created, chosen connection over isolation. That was an achievement worth more than any research paper. But Jeremy struggled with the Bigfoot story. He wanted to believe me, wanted to understand, but it was too strange, too impossible. On the 10th day, I showed him the carving Seven had made, the human and Bigfoot side by side, carved from a branch with stone tools. Jeremy examined it carefully, noted the craftsmanship, the deliberate design. This could be anything, Dad. You could have made this yourself. It does not prove what you are saying is real. You are right, I said. I cannot prove it. But you asked why I ran, why I chose what I chose. That is the answer. True or not, that is what I believe happened. That is what changed me. Jeremy set down the carving. Mom said you changed after you came back, after the divorce. She said you seemed different, more present. She thought maybe you had had a breakdown, gotten help. I did have a breakdown, in a way. I broke down who I was and rebuilt something better. Seven showed me how. Taught me to be present, to value life beyond usefulness, to protect rather than exploit. We sat in silence, coffee cooling between us. Jeremy spoke quietly. I was angry at you for so long, angry that you chose work over me, that you disappeared, that you became this criminal, this person I could not understand or defend. I do not expect you to defend me. I just wanted you to understand why. Not to forgive, just to understand. Jeremy looked at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. I have kids now, Dad, a son and a daughter, and I think about you sometimes when I am with them. I think about the choices you made, the things you missed, and I try to do better. You did do better. You became the father I should have been. We both cried then, years of distance and loss pouring out. I had missed his entire life, and he had missed having a father. That could not be fixed, but it could be acknowledged. Jeremy asked what I wanted him to do with my story after I died. Did I want him to expose the facility, clear my name, vindicate my choices? I thought about Seven, about the hidden valley, about the small community that still survived. I thought about the promise I had made to protect them, to keep their secret. No, I said. Let them think I was crazy or criminal. It does not matter. What matters is that Seven and its people stay hidden, stay safe. That is worth more than my reputation. I died on a morning in late spring of 2025. I do not remember the exact moment, just a gradual fading, like falling asleep after a long, exhausting day. Jeremy was there. He held my hand, told me it was okay to let go. His voice was the last thing I heard, forgiving and sad and strangely peaceful. I had made my peace weeks before, with my choices, my failures, my successes. I had saved one life and ruined my own, and I would make the same choice again. Seven had taught me that presence matters more than perfection. That connection is worth sacrifice, that some beings deserve protection simply because they exist, not because they are useful. I hoped Seven was still alive, still teaching younger Bigfoots the old ways, still carrying the culture of its people forward into an uncertain future. I hoped Jeremy would keep the secret, would honor my wishes even though he did not fully believe. That hope was all I could take with me. Everything else, I left behind. Jeremy told me later what happened after. He had me cremated, scattered some of my ashes in the mountains near where I had worked, where it all began. The rest he kept, unsure what to do with them. He took the carving, the journals I had written, the few possessions that mattered. He struggled with my story. Some days he believed it, thought his father really had saved a Bigfoot and lived a strange, noble life on the run. Other days he thought it was delusion, mental illness, a story I created to justify abandoning my family. But 2 months after my death, Jeremy made a decision. He took a vacation alone, told his wife he needed to process his father's death. He drove north, following notes in my journal, looking for the valley I had described. He did not expect to find it. He thought maybe the journey itself would give him closure, would let him say goodbye to the father he had never really known. But he found it. The valley, hidden and perfect. He approached carefully, uncertain what he was looking for, and he heard it. A sound that was not quite animal, not quite human. a call that echoed off the peaks. Jeremy froze, unsure whether to run or wait. The sound came again, closer. Then he saw it. A Bigfoot, massive and covered in graying fur, emerging from the trees. It stopped, watching him. Jeremy recognized the scar on its shoulder, the old bullet wound I had treated 27 years ago. 7, older now, still alive. They stared at each other across the distance. Jeremy, too, shocked to move. 7 assessing whether this human was a threat. Then, 7 saw the carving Jeremy was holding, the one it had made for me. Recognition dawned in its eyes. 7 approached slowly, cautiously. It reached out and touched the carving gently, a memory made physical. Then, it looked at Jeremy, understanding somehow that this was my son. 7 placed its hand on Jeremy's shoulder, a gesture I had described in my journals. Acknowledgement, respect, maybe gratitude that someone had come to remember. Then 7 turned and disappeared into the forest, back to the hidden places where its kind still survived. Jeremy stood there for a long time, holding the carving, understanding finally what I'd been trying to tell him. Jeremy drove back to Oregon in a daze, his entire worldview fractured and rebuilding. His father had not been crazy. The story had been real. Bigfoots existed, hidden and vulnerable, and his father had given up everything to protect them. He did not tell his wife immediately. How do you explain something like that? How do you say, I saw a Bigfoot and it remembered my father? But eventually, slowly, he told her the whole story. She listened, skeptical, but open. She had learned to trust Jeremy's judgment over years of marriage. She asked what he was going to do with the information. Was he going to tell anyone, expose the secret, prove that Bigfoots were real? Jeremy thought about that question for weeks. He thought about the facility I had described, about other places that might still exist. He thought about what would happen if the world knew, if scientists and hunters and tourists descended on the few remaining Bigfoots. He thought about 7, old and scarred, still teaching young Bigfoots to survive, still carrying forward a culture that was almost extinct. And he made the same choice I had made, protection over exposure, privacy over proof. He burned my journals, the detailed ones that described locations and landmarks. He kept only the personal entries, the ones that talked about lessons learned and choices made. He took the remaining ashes, the ones he had not scattered, and he hiked back to that valley. He spread them near where he had seen 7, returning me to the place that had mattered most. He left the carving there too, placed carefully on a rock, a marker, a memory, proof that the connection between 2 beings had been real and meaningful. Jeremy never went back to that valley. He had seen what he needed to see, understood what needed understanding. The rest was not his story to tell. He became an advocate for wilderness preservation, working with conservation groups to protect old-growth forests and remote habitats. He never explained his real motivation, just worked quietly to keep certain places untouched. His children asked sometimes about their grandfather, the one they had never met. Jeremy told them I had been a scientist who made hard choices, who believed some things were worth protecting even at great personal cost. He told them I had taught him, indirectly, that presence matters, that being there for the people you love is more important than any achievement or ambition. He tried to pass on the lessons 7 had taught me, filtered through my journals and his own experience. Be present. Value life for its own sake, not for its usefulness. Protect rather than exploit. Connect rather than isolate. His son asked once if the grandfather he never met had been a good person. Jeremy thought about that question carefully before answering. He made mistakes, Jeremy said, big ones. He was absent when he should have been present. He worked for people he should not have worked for. But when it mattered, when he saw something that needed protecting, he made the right choice. Even though it cost him everything, that is the best any of us can do. Make the right choice when it counts, even if it is hard, even if it costs us. Years passed quietly. Jeremy raised his children, taught his students, lived a life that honored the lessons his father had tried to teach. He never spoke publicly about Bigfoots, never tried to prove what he had seen. But he thought about 7 often, wondered if it was still alive, still teaching, still carrying forward the knowledge of its people, wondered if the small community in that hidden valley had survived. He thought about me too, about the choices I had made. He understood now why I had run, why I had chosen protection over vindication. Some things were more important than being believed. The world changed around him. Technology advanced, wilderness areas shrank, human presence expanded into places that had once been truly remote. Jeremy worried about the remaining Bigfoots, about whether they could survive in a world that left fewer and fewer places to hide. He did what he could, donated to conservation efforts, volunteered for habitat protection, fought development in critical areas, small actions that might not matter, but might be the difference between extinction and survival. His daughter asked him once why he cared so much about forests and wild places. Jeremy struggled to answer without revealing the truth. Because there are things in the world that need protection, he finally said. Things that most people do not see or understand. And if we do not protect them, they will disappear, and the world will be smaller and sadder for their loss. She seemed to understand, even without knowing the specifics. Some truths are too big to explain directly. They have to be felt, experienced, understood through action rather than words. Jeremy grew older, his children grew up, grandchildren arrived. He taught them to love wilderness, to respect nature, to understand that not everything valuable can be measured or quantified. He kept the carving I had made, the only physical proof that any of it had been real. He would hold it sometimes, running his fingers over the carved figures, remembering that morning in the valley when he had seen 7. Sometimes he wondered if he had imagined it, if grief and hope had created something that was not really there. But then he would remember the specific details, the scar on 7's shoulder, the recognition in its eyes, the gentle touch on his shoulder. It had been real. His father's story had been real. And that knowledge had changed everything about how Jeremy understood the world. He told his wife once, late at night when they were old and comfortable with each other, that he was glad his father had run. Glad he had made the choice to save 7, even though it meant abandoning his family. She asked why. It seemed like a strange thing to be glad about. Because it taught me that some choices are impossible, Jeremy said. That sometimes doing the right thing means hurting people you love. And that is tragic, but it is also necessary. My father showed me that. He made the impossible choice, and I learned from watching the consequences. I try to make different choices, to be present for my family, to not abandon the people who need me. But I understand now that he could not do both. He could not save 7 and be my father. The world forced him to choose. He chose to save a life. I wish he could have done both, but I respect the choice he made. This is where Jeremy's story ends, and where mine ends with it. I have been dead for years now, my ashes scattered in mountains where Bigfoot still hide, where wilderness still exists in the margins of human civilization. 7 is probably dead too by now. Bigfoots do not live forever, and 7 was already scarred and worn when Jeremy saw it. The old Bigfoot has returned to the earth, its knowledge passed to younger generations, its story preserved in ways humans will never document. The hidden valley might still shelter a few survivors, or it might be empty. The last Bigfoot's gone to wherever extinct things go. I will never know, and neither will Jeremy. But the lessons remain. The things 7 taught me about presence, about connection, about protection. Those do not die. Those can be passed forward, generation to generation, changing people in small ways that accumulate into larger change. Jeremy passes them to his children. They pass them to theirs. The ripples continue outward, transforming how people think about wild places, about undiscovered beings, about the value of life that serves no human purpose. Maybe that is enough. Maybe saving one Bigfoot and changing one person who changed others is sufficient legacy for a wasted life that found redemption in darkness underground. I do not know if I was a good man. I know I was a terrible husband, a worse father, and a scientist who enabled atrocities. But I also know I made one choice that mattered, one sacrifice that meant something. I saved 7, and 7 saved me. 2 beings who should never have connected, who found each other through tragedy and transformed each other through choice. That is the truth, simple and impossible, unverifiable and absolute. The government still denies that Bigfoots exist. The facility where I worked is officially erased from records, its research buried under classification that will last decades. Dr. Lin and the others who participated face no consequences, suffer no judgment. But somewhere in the mountains, if we are lucky, a few Bigfoots still survive, still teaching their young the old ways, still hiding from humans who would study them or hunt them or simply destroy them through careless expansion. They survive because people made choices. I chose to free 7. 7 chose to trust me. Jeremy chose to keep the secret. Each choice mattered. Each one contributed to survival. Maybe you will make choices too. Maybe you will see something that needs protection, something vulnerable and valuable. Maybe you will choose to preserve rather than expose, to honor rather than exploit. That is all I can ask. That the story continues, that the lessons persist, that some mysteries remain mysterious, because that is how they survive. I helped a Bigfoot escape from a government lab. I ran for 27 years. I died alone but at peace, knowing I had done one thing right in a life full of mistakes. That is enough. That has to be enough. 7 is gone. I am gone. But the secret remains and the wilderness endures. And somewhere in the hidden places, life continues in forms we barely understand. Protect it, please. That's the only thing that matters now.